Welcome to Product AMA, your daily online Ask Me Anything. We started Product AMA to give those passionate or curious about product management a daily break, something to look forward to.
Our topic for today is succeeding as a product manager during and after a pandemic. And to enlighten us about this topic, we have Amin Bashi, who is the VP of Product at Careguide. In the past, Amin has been a co-founder, a mentor, and a lecturer. He even got an admit to Harvard Business School, but decided to turn that down. We are so excited to have you, Amin. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us more about that Harvard offer?
Sure. Thank you so much. Really happy to be here with you today. So as you mentioned, I'm Careguide's VP of Product. Careguide is a personalized care matching platform. We have a portfolio of online marketplaces, and our portfolio consists of eldercare.com, sitter.com, canadiannanny.ca, which is the biggest nanny marketplace in Canada, petsitter.com, housekeeper.com, which is the go-to marketplace for finding housekeeping professionals for all these Airbnb places, hotels, and even tons of families in North America when they're looking for a housekeeper. That's where they go to housekeeper.com to find their next housekeeper. Also, we operate childcareadvantage.com, housesitter.com, and 21 other marketplaces. For each of these marketplaces, we champion great independent caregivers and introduce them to great families, and we support them as they build long-lasting relationships directly with their clients. Every minute we make a difference in someone's life, and it's even more impactful right now with so many people who've lost their jobs and now they're trying to get back into finding the next thing for themselves and for their families, to be able to support their families. It's quite incredible to be able to be making that difference. And today we have more than 5 million registered members and have more than 140 million in processed payments through our payroll system. And we're just getting started. Now to answer your question related to HBS and turning down that acceptance offer, I know I might come across as an idiot for doing that, but it was definitely one of the best decisions I made. You know, we only hear about famous people who went to Harvard University. You know, people like Bill Gates, former First Lady Michelle Obama, John F. Kennedy, NBA basketball player Jeremy Lin, and some of these other famous people. But what about the thousands of graduates that Harvard Business School spits out every year? What do they do? Before getting myself into a massive amount of student debt and spending 2 of my most impactful years in school again, after finishing my undergrad in system design engineering at the University of Waterloo, I decided to do a sampling of HBS grads and look at their LinkedIn profiles online. To get my search started, I chose one person I know who went to Harvard Business School, and then essentially clicked through to see what their fellow classmates ended up doing. Now, my sample set was admittedly biased as someone with a tech background who knows more people in the tech industry than an average person does. But to make my search more relevant, which was really important to me, to the new world we're living in, I primarily focused on recency and time post-graduation. So I essentially focused on students in different cohorts from 2002 to 2010. And the examples of some of those typical profiles that I came across were these. So profile one was kind of person who, before HBS, they were an analyst at one of the top 3 consulting companies for 2 to 4 years. After that, they became a senior consultant at one of the top 3 consulting companies for 7 to 9 years. That was about 45% of the population that I was looking at. Profile 2 was before they were a product manager at one of the top 5 tech companies for 3 to 5 years. And then after they moved on to become senior product managers, again, at one of the top 5 tech companies. And that was about 20% of the population that I looked at. And then profile 3 was the people that they were doing operations at a startup in Silicon Valley. And then after they moved on to be VP of operations, and the ones that I talked to, that 10% of the population that I talked to that fell in that category, they all were ended up working at a startup that ended up failing in terms of operations and in terms of being able to finance the growth and getting to the next level. And profile 4 is the people that I talked to that were before product managers at a startup, and after they continue moving on a startup that they were still working on, and they still didn't have product market fit. They were still not, nowhere close to what you hear of Shopify and all these other startups that have made it to become successful. And I was about 25% off the people I talked to. So none of those profiles were of interest to me. So instead of following that path that of, this is the right thing to do, and I should just move forward with it because that's what the society tells me to do that, it looked like a bad investment to me for what I wanted to do. So the learnings I had, and the way I treated it was exactly like a product manager. I not just didn't look at it on the surface, I did user interviews with them. I talked to them, reached out to them, and they were all very generous in giving me a time, 15 minutes to talk to them, learn about what they learned, what were things that they took out of that experience. And the things that came out of it that I learned were, number one is that we need to challenge our unhealthy desire for social status and money. Number two is that we need to actually discover what actual Harvard and other Ivy League graduates do for a living. And also think about the fact that we need to encourage our smartest people to do more productive things that can lead to great results without following that path that we've been told is the only way to get to become successful. And also we need to help our business schools to reinvent themselves and become relevant again, so the graduates can be more successful after graduation. And that's why right now I'm currently devoting my time to product school. So unlike MBA programs, product school's content and structure is highly relevant for the next generation of technology leaders. And the classes are offered at a fraction of the cost. So in my past cohorts, I've had students, I've had multiple students that have gone from being a junior PM at a tech company to becoming head of product at the same level size companies or even bigger tech companies here in Toronto, and also with the online courses that I've been teaching all around the world. The reality is that they would be less likely to be able to do that if they chose to pursue the common path that some of us may choose. And at the end of the day, for most people who want to become a PM, the MBA is still useful, but it's not necessary. So you have to ask yourself whether it's worth that 1-2 years of being out of work versus spending that time learning on the job in a related role at a fast-growing startup. And I know that's hard. It's hard to get into those fast-growing startups. For me, I was lucky enough to be able to join Shopify back in 2015. And when I was there, that was a transformational experience. But today we still have those companies, right? We still have companies like Careguide. We have companies like Rhythem, Acto Technologies, and Browse, and many more great companies here in Toronto that can allow those PMs that want to get to the next level to be able to learn really fast and get on a rocket trip.
Spoken like a true product manager, I would say. Awesome. That's a great journey that you've had, and so much analysis going into making that decision. That's great. So let's start off the AMA with getting to know that as a product leader, what has changed for you and your PMs as this health crisis has unfolded and hit our societies and communities?
Totally. Right now, I think slowly but surely things are getting back to normal for some companies. So when you're looking at, the companies that did have a really rough time in April and May, at the end of May, they kind of started seeing a little bit of growth. Still not back to what it was before the pandemic, but things are slowly but surely getting back to that normal state. And with the exception of remote collaboration software, e-commerce, and few other industries, very few places are hitting the targets they set prior to the pandemic. Same thing at Careguide. Again, we had really aggressive targets for growth, but obviously we did not predict that we were going to have something like this coming our way. But the thing that it's really interesting during times like this, during a pandemic like this, before, during, and after, is that it really shows you what companies do pass Sean Ellis's test on product market fit, right? So what Sean Ellis says is that in order to find product market fit, and in order to find out if you do have product market fit, you can ask your users, how would you feel if you could no longer use our product? And the answers are very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed. So it really wasn't, it's not really that useful. It's really nice to have. And the fourth option is, and that's the third option. So very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And if the ratio of the answers you get for very disappointed is more than 40%, then you know that you have that product market fit. And the reality is that, what happened during the pandemic, a lot of companies, a lot of products that were nice to have versus essential businesses and essential products, they got really affected the most, right? So thinking of B2B and B2C, when it comes down to you managing your finances and managing your cash flow and managing any extra fat you have in your bank account that you want to cut out, the first thing you do is like, what do we need to be able to survive and be able to operate? And what is it nice to have that we can get out of the way and cut it out? And again, if you did pass that test, great, double down on it. But if it happened for you to be a PM on a product that did not pass that test, it's a great time to look back. If you can do another iteration and think about improving your product, is thinking about how can you make it into an essential product, something that people need to actually get their jobs to be done, completed effectively. So we did luckily pass the test at Careguide. But like many other companies, we also felt the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic back in April. Unfortunately, we made a decision to temporarily lay off some of our full-time employees. And that was honestly definitely one of the hardest things we had to do as a business. But in recent weeks, we did extremely well in terms of our targets, and we have successfully restored our business and are pretty much fully recovered at this point. And we are growing again. And yesterday, actually, we had more sales than we had prior to the pandemic, as our users have started to hire care providers again. And we started addressing the new normal, the new state of how things are, instead of just sitting around, not doing anything and be like, well, it's going to get better. We acted fast, and we made changes to our product to make sure that we can come out of this pandemic and go through this pandemic as successfully as we can. And I think the biggest change for us right now, and that's affecting all of the companies all around the world, is how this affected our product development process. So at Careguide, in order to react faster to the reality, we moved away from our quarterly OKRs, objectives and key results planning. And we started doing weekly and monthly planning based on a new set of KPIs that we work closely with our CFO to establish. And the other big change, back to your question around how affected the team was around how we communicate with each other and how we get things done as a remote team. Some companies like Zapier, this is not a new reality for them. They've started remote, they've hired remote, they've trained everyone remotely, and they've worked remotely successfully, and they've managed to scale a team. Well, when you have a company that the team members on that team, they are not used to this whole remote setting, it can be challenging for them to be able to adapt to this new reality and be able to be as productive as they were back in the office. So what essentially, so like I said, the massive change that we had to work with was how we communicate with each other and how we get things done as a remote team. And one of the changes we made was building a culture of adding people on your Zoom calls or your video calls, whatever video tool you use at work. It's easy to have a discussion and pause and say, Sam or Sarah should be involved in making this decision. If Sam is in the office, you will likely grab them and bring them into your meeting. But if Sam is remote, that often gets forgotten. And we did make that mistake a few times and made bad decisions. So it's really easy to forget about that. So it's important, and we soon learned that it's important to go out of your way to get the remote person into the meeting and treat it as if you would treat it back in the office. So if you would have interrupted someone in the office, then it's worth bringing them in or waiting until they're available so they can be involved in that decision-making process that you're doing for your product. The other thing we did that's working great right now is having a Zoom call open constantly where people can join at any time. Working remotely can be very lonely, especially for our PMs, we're always in meetings and we do interact with a lot of people all the time. But for your development team and sometimes even the design team, the experience can be really lonely. So having a place where people can just drop in that Zoom call and just talk to each other, exchange ideas, and just have that kind of company as they're getting things done and working can make a huge impact. It did help us, but again, something I would worth to do as an experiment for your team to see if it also can help your team as well.
Great. And talking about like the business and like the impact of COVID on the business of Careguide, we have a question here that with all overnight camps cancelled in Ontario and with day camps not being able to accommodate all the families who signed up, have you seen any influx of parents looking for caregivers through your services?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the challenge is we, as a North American company, being operating in different provinces, different states, different cities, things do not move or change at the same rate. So you might have, things are different right now in BC and Quebec or in California than they are in Toronto, in Ontario or in New York. So the way we go about it, it has to be based on a way that we are focusing 80% of our focus on things that have massive impact on all of these users all around North America. So things that we've learned and we did adapt to, which I think we did, I'm glad we did it that way, was around virtual sitting. So right now, childcareadvantage.com is a marketplace for matching childcare centers to finding early education, child educators that can essentially work at these childcare centers. And their business is not right now growing. They're not looking to hire as many people, but we're seeing more families forming smaller local childcare centers. So family that essentially like 3 or 4 families that live near each other, or even 2 families that live near each other, they essentially share a nanny. And the nanny ends up making more money and the families end up paying less money. So it's a win-win, and the unit economics work really well for both sides and for us when we can do things like that, creating these local, essentially childcare centers around the city. And again, it's not something that works really well, in smaller cities or remote cities. It's something that, again, we've seen success with in major cities like Toronto, New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, and why not? But the other thing that we noticed during the pandemic was this concept of virtual sitting. So again, something that we never thought of or would even think that it's even make any sense was the idea of essentially, you have 2 working parents, they have kids, they have meetings to go to, and sometimes these meetings, are at the same time. They need a caregiver, they need a nanny to be able to, take care of their kids, especially like if they're at an age like 4 or 5, that they are at a point that they can interact with someone over a Zoom call or a Skype call and hold an iPad. One of the things that we noticed is that there was a pattern and there was a new trend in that area where you would essentially find someone, they would not come to your place. So again, you're practicing social distancing. They would spend like an hour or 2 on a Zoom call or Skype call entertaining your children. So they would read stories to them, they would draw things together, they would tell them stories, and also they would tutor them. So like for kids that were a little bit older and they needed tutoring for school, we also have saw a massive increase in interest for people that were looking for nannies that could also educate their children. But one of the things that we realized that was really a micro trend. It's not something that it made sense for us to ingrain into our product and do migration to be able to support that kind of infrastructure where you essentially support this new interaction on a marketplace. So what we did instead, we did start with validating the idea through email. So we just sent an email to our users, and what we essentially recommended both sides of the marketplace was for people interested in offering virtual sitting or virtual tutoring to update their profile saying that they do offer that. And then for the ones that are looking for virtual sitting or virtual tutoring, to do the same and update their profile in the description and say that they're looking for that kind of service. And we said that if we get enough traction, if enough people act on this, and we see that this is going to be a trend that we need to double down on and actually build this feature, then we're going to go ahead and spend our time and take our time to build this functionality and add it to the product. But it turned out that it was not something that did resonate with our user base. And the funny thing is, like, that's something that all of our competitors did right off the bat. They added this feature, virtual sitting, to their service, and they're all just following each other and copying each other, just thinking that they do have product market fit with this idea. But we didn't do that. We said, let's take a step back. Let's actually think about it. Let's talk to our users. So we spent a lot of time interviewing our users to understand if this does really solve their problem. And it turned out that it's interesting, but it's again it's not something that they would see themselves actually investing the time into doing and seeing their kids interacting with someone virtually over Zoom or Skype. So again, we didn't say we're not just going to even try. We did try it, but we did build the most efficient MVP we could to validate the idea and validate the market.
Awesome. And of course, no one could have predicted or can predict a crisis like this one and measure its impact. But for product managers, what skills do you think can be super helpful and useful to assess situations and succeed in their role? And how can they acquire these skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the interesting thing is that, and again, I know this is something that a lot of people might disagree with. I personally believe that product management can be even more effective when done remotely. And the reason for that is that, yes, product management is fast-paced. So communication needs to be done in detail and accurately, even when you're not face-to-face with the rest of the team. So what happens usually when the teams are working remotely is communication can get lost in Slack or in different places that you make those decisions. And because things are not properly documented, miscommunication happens. When teams are working remotely, if they develop the right set of culture for the product management team, what happens is that you end up over documenting everything. You end up documenting every decision you make. You end up documenting every detail about how things should be done. So there's full transparency around the decisions that are being made and why they're being made. So right now, the reality is, humanity and all of us are in the middle of an extensive adaptation phase. And truth to be told, nobody really knows how it will impact our political, economic, and social structures. And now more than ever, the future of our product is unknown. So the best we can do as product managers right now during these challenging times is something that I follow personally. And again, definitely it's not the only way of doing it, is number one is maintaining a consistent schedule. So I've tried to do that with the team and myself to be able to be fully aligned and fully on board and fully present when we are working together. If your design team, they're working from 9 to 12 and then 12 to 3, they're just taking the time off, and then working from 6 to 9 p.m. And then your product team or engineering team, they're working from 9 to 3, and then after 3, they kind of wrap things up and leave. There's going to be a lot of time lost that can be used for collaboration and communication. So maintaining that consistent schedule and committing to it is really important. The other thing is communication, right? So PMs, it's our number one responsibility to help the team to be able to successfully communicate the decisions that are being made. And again, I always say this, like PMs are not always, and in most cases are not in charge of making the decisions. They're in charge of the quality of the decisions that are being made. So it's important to be involved in that communication process and help the team to communicate in an all remote environment. The other thing that we've tried to do is help the team make sense of COVID-19, right? And even right now with things that are happening in the States, these are really rough times. These are not normal situations where you can expect your team to be as productive as they were back in the office with a perfect world that we live in. There are really challenging times, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to make sure we're present for the team if they're going through something that they need more support. We need to make sure we will be there for them to support them. And we need to provide clarity on the new priorities. Today's priority will change tomorrow as our understanding of COVID-19 and the measures taken to fight it will progress. And in our case, we have to adapt it to the state, to the country that we are serving and working and operating our marketplace in, so that this can be quite challenging, and we consistently need to provide that clarity on the new priorities. The one thing that can easily be forgotten is the whole idea around one-on-one coffees and lunches between team members, but also between leadership levels of the two or multiple groups. So your product team, sales team, if it's a B2B, customer success team, and all the different departments, it's important to still be aligned with them and do virtual one-on-one coffees with them, with your development team, with your design team. Even if you're not managing anyone directly, as PMs, we should always be aligned with everyone and should go out of our way and schedule those one-on-ones to be fully aligned and to be fully present for our team. The other thing that we've done, and I think this is like kind of given, everyone is very good at it by now, is turn to video tools to bridge the communication gap. And the example I mentioned earlier about Zoom. The other thing is, as natural leaders without influence, product managers have an obligation to help the team channel all of its desire for a better world, so that they can essentially do their part and have the impact they want. And then the other thing, the last thing I have to say is around prioritization. So prioritize effectively, but more importantly, inspire and motivate your team. Somehow a lot of people have established that the job of a product manager is to prioritize features, and that you can come up with this magical way of prioritizing features. Your team is not looking at you as a PM for a magical way. They are looking for you to lead. They're looking for you to think critically, come up with a reasonable way of prioritizing what customers value, what your users value, and make sure those are going to get delivered first. And then your team, your engineering team, your design team, your all the other departments and the entire company, they're looking for you to tell a story that they can believe and be inspired by. During these days, during these times, the one thing can still get us all up every morning and bring us to work and bring us to do our best and be productive is that inspiration that we need, is that story that we need, is that impact that we are having on the world is what we believe in. And again, at Careguide, as much as we do care about sales, as much as we do care about our subscriptions and revenue, at the end of the day, we know that every minute we're making a difference in someone's life, and we are enabling and empowering these caregivers to be able to get around, get rid of that middleman that's going to take 60-70% of this, the money that they deserve and they should be making, and we're going to help them to directly connect them with families that need caregivers. And telling that story to your development team, reminding them of your mission and vision, and sounding like a broken record is something that we should always make sure that we do as PMs. And at the end of the day, they are looking for you to think critically and come up with a reasonable way of prioritizing what you build. But yes, you do need to make decisions on what happens first and why not. But that is such a small part of the product manager's job, in my opinion. So don't obsess over prioritization. Obsess about being a leader. Obsess about being a storyteller. Obsess with discovering customers' real pain points, and make sure that that's what you're spending your time on and prioritizing your time And I didn't. And the last, sorry, this is my last point. The last thing I want to say is also doing weekly retros. So we were doing bi-weekly retros at Careguide before the pandemic happened. But we knew that this was going to be a new world that we were going to live in, and this was going to be a new way for us as a team to work together. So we needed a lot faster, more frequent feedback loops to be able to work with each other more effectively and do a better job on working together as a team. So we turned that into weekly retros. And it's important now, sometimes we forget to essentially take the time to get to know each other, especially when things are done remotely or when you have new team members that you're hiring remotely. So one of the things that we've started doing at our retros is at the end of the retro, we do talk about work, we do talk about collaboration, we do talk about what we can do better as a team. But what we do at the end, we pick one person on the team and ask them any questions. That doesn't have to be work related. You just want to get to know them personally. You want to know, what are their favorite hobbies? What are the things that they do after work? Why did they join Careguide in the first place? And kind of questions that allow us to get them to know, allow us to get to know them better and be able to be closer together and work like a team.
Awesome. And we have a question around, the effect of COVID on your strategy and roadmap. And I'm going to combine it with another question that I had for you, is that a pandemic can nearly shake all your planning, your strategy, your roadmap, and PMs might need to reprioritize, upon which you touched, slightly in your answer. And unfortunately, a lot of companies had to go through restructuring as well. So what advice do you have for PMs for what I would call pandemic planning?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's something that, a lot of product teams are trying to kind of make sense of right now and figure out how to go about, doing it effectively, doing it properly, and make sure that they're still creating value. They still have structure. They still are doing things based on things that have the biggest impact on the business. The thing that we found out is that it's important to set your priorities based on the new world that we are living in. So it's important to understand what your financial targets are. The reality is that every company is trying to be as efficient as possible right now. And the challenge is that is very different today than it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So in the new world that we're living in, how do you go about planning your roadmap? And things that we've learned is that right now timelines need and they have to get drastically shorter in our current environment. What we've found effective and we've had success with is only looking at, we're only now getting around to being able to see past next week and into next month. There's no way for us to be able to predict next quarter, not knowing another second wave is coming our way, whether in the US or in Canada or in some of the markets that we are mainly generating our revenue in. So next quarter is highly risky, right? So depending on when your quarter starts and how you plan your OKRs, the companies that do their Q3 starts in July are probably now thinking, should we do our Q3 planning? Should we come up with our objectives for Q3? We are not doing that. We still think next quarter is still highly risky. And next year, honestly, at best is a guess. Again, you can take a wild guess of what that might look like, but it's too risky to operate your Horizon 1 planning on Horizon 1 planning and Horizon 1 product for next year. So what I'm referring to with Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 is McKinsey's model around how you should strategize your company's innovation and product. So Horizon 1 is everything, your core business, what you're operating today, and what's essentially getting you to be able to fuel your Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 innovative ideas that you have. So right now, the product roadmaps should absolutely reflect the current reality. And again, I don't think we do have enough information right now to be able to know when things are going to get back to normal, to be able to plan things as we did in the past. So pandemic planning should be really about making our feedback loop as smaller as possible. Sometimes some companies that cannot do weekly planning, that's totally okay. Do bi-weekly planning, do monthly planning, but definitely avoid over committing to a plan for a quarter, not having enough information and enough confidence to be able to make the right decision.
All right. And you touched a lot about working remotely and how to effectively do that. And you also shared some tips about how product managers and leaders can lead remote teams. But Lee's asking a question here about, other than video meetings, have you discovered any of your tools are not as effective now, or are there new tools that you have discovered and started using to facilitate remote working better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, we do. And I think, I don't know if other companies at this point have seen this, they're going to soon probably realize it, it's just a matter of time, is Slack. I've personally never used Microsoft Teams, but from what I've been told, it's very similar to Slack and how it functions and operates. So that's actually interesting that Lee brought it up, because I was thinking about this last week. And admittedly, we haven't acted on this yet at Careguide, but something I definitely want to consider at some point if this remote work is going to become the new reality, like it did for Twitter and Shopify. So Slack is fun, right? It's fun. It's a lot of fun at first, but it quickly becomes overwhelming. Teams get stuck in never-ending group chats. Information gets lost. Multiple topics gets jumbled together inside Slack's channels. And I'm just looking at our Slack channel right now with tons of notifications I have. And the reality, if you ask any PM, it's exhausting and time consuming, right, to follow along. Imagine if these were like meeting rooms, there were like 30 meeting rooms, and you had, in order to keep up with all the decisions that are being made and everything that's being discussed, you had to literally be present at all of these 30 meetings simultaneously. So the problem with Slack right now for remote teams is that context gets lost in a matter of minutes. There's a lot of noise in Slack, and it's really easy to miss important messages. People start defaulting to direct messages. Today, when I was checking DMs on Slack, account for 70% of Slack usage. So 70% of Slack usage is DMs, people direct messaging each other. So the problem with that is that knowledge gets siloed. If Lee and I are talking about something in our private message, we can make a decision, and then two other people that should have been involved in that decision, they're never going to see that information. Even worse, it was just something that maybe Lee and I needed to know, but both of us ended up leaving the company, and we made a decision in that DM, and we both now left the company. So the company now even doesn't have access to that decision, that knowledge that was exchanged between two people. So group chat apps like Slack or Microsoft Teams, they are built for a specific kind of communication, right? So one line at a time, real-time conversations. That form of communication is useful, right? Like it was pretty useful when we were back in the office. But the challenge is that it presents significant downsides when it becomes your team's primary way of communicating, which it has become the primary way of communicating for most teams that are working remotely right now. In Slack, if you're not following a specific conversation as they unfold, you're likely missing out on important discussions and decisions. And it can become problematic for a remote company with team members spread across many different time zones. So our CEO, for example, he's based out of Vancouver, right? Not as bad of a time difference, but imagine now you had a development in Ukraine or in India or in another country with a significant time difference. So the problem with that now is that how do you stay in loop, right? When earlier topics have already been discussed and they're hard to find by the time you even wake up. So, you might ask, well, what's the alternative, right? And again, admittedly, we haven't made the switch. We haven't done this yet. Something I'm thinking about, but it's a tough conversation to have right now with everything going on, is switching to a platform called Twist. So in a platform like Twist, I'll share the link in our group chat in a second. The workflows naturally, right? So you're not pressured to respond immediately. The platform gives people the space and time to make progress on work that matters. And the teams that have tried it, again, according to them, I don't know if this is true, 81% of the teams that switch from Slack to Twist, they reported more efficient teamwork. The thing that I did play around with it a little bit, information in the platform is easily discoverable, which is super important. Like the decisions made, the information shared, collaboration done, everything is super accessible. And because the full context of each thread is preserved, it promotes a more transparent culture and fewer meetings that is essential and super important for remote teams.
Yeah, and I just shared the link to Twist, and they very proudly say that we are an alternative to Slack, and which keeps teamwork organized, on topic, and easy to find forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. We have a question here from Faze, and he's asking, how do you see product management changing, especially in terms of the proximity of teams following COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe, so again, looking at companies like Shopify and Twitter, at Shopify, even when we were working in the office, and back in the day in Toronto, we only had like 80 people, but we still had a remote team. Like we have people that were working remotely, and we had multiple offices. The one thing that did happen and made it a little bit challenging is this kind of in between version of remote and in office. The problem is that, so we had PMs that were based out of Toronto, but the entire development team was based out of Ottawa. The PM can feel left out, right? The PM can, they need to do more. They need to do not just more traveling, but also they need to find different ways to connect with the team that they're all together, but they feel siloed and feel left out. Remote is not bad if the entire team is remote. It becomes really challenging when you have few people that are working remotely, few people that are in the office, and then even worse, you have multiple locations all around the world, and some people are working remotely, some people are not. For the management team and for the executive team, it becomes really challenging to make sure that they're providing the same experience for remote employees and for people that are working in the office. And for employees themselves, the retention goes down, right? They don't feel, one of the things that I believe business school, York University did a research on was around, the impact of network you create at work on retention. If you feel connected to your employees and your colleagues, you're a lot less likely to leave the organization. And the challenge is that when you're remote and you don't have those face-to-face communication, and one as a PM, you can feel left out, and you're not, your development team, they're sitting beside each other, they're sharing information, they make a decision without you being involved. So that's really tough. So if that happens, like companies decide to make remote optional, that can be super challenging. That can be really hard for PMs. And honestly, I've never been in that position to be able to comment on it. I do not have expertise in that area. But if companies like Shopify and Twitter go into this like fully remote, like we are going to be fully remote from now on, and have that in place, then that's different. Then you don't have half of the team working remotely, the other half in the office. You can create the same experience. But in terms of talent and finding jobs, I think that developers and engineers and programmers are going to have a really hard time competing now. The salaries that they were getting back in if they're getting in San Francisco or even here in Toronto, the level of competition that they have for salary and being able to really negotiate the salary up to the point that they want is going to be challenged by platforms like uteam.io, I think. So they recently went through YC, and what they do, I'm going to share the link also in the group chat. So what they're doing, essentially, they're making this more easier for companies to be able to find talent offshore. You cannot really do that with product management. And the reason for it is that you need to still be close to the management team. So if your management team is in a different country, that's a different story. But if your management team, your leadership team, and your users are in North America, you need to be present. You need to be here. Not necessarily true as a programmer. And it's interesting, right? Like House Party, the founder of House Party, I believe he's from Israel. But in order to build House Party, which they've gone viral on the App Store, it's like #1 App Store in 82 countries right now. Well, in order to be able to do that, he realized that in order to make that app #1 social app in in North America, he needs to be here. He needs to be present here to understand the social norms, understand how people behave, how people talk, how things go viral here in North America, and be ingrained into society to be able to do that. I think, again, like I said, other than the tools and practices and things that PMs need to do to be able to be successful in a remote setting, I don't think necessarily it's going to affect them as much as it might affect other roles at a tech company.
All right. And we do have some more time with Amin left. So feel free to ask any other questions that you might have. I'll move ahead with asking you another question. So at the heart of every product are its users and customers, and they might be feeling a variety of sentiments right now. Mm-hmm. What role can product managers play to support them and keep them engaged?
That's a great question. This is true for both B2B and B2C products, right? And obviously B2C. So in business and in life, we do hide behind so many assumptions that we believe are true until life forces us to re-examine those. And during the pandemic, I think a lot of people, including myself, we were forced to change our thinking and seeing different ways that we can reimagine how we work, how we live our life, how we get things done. Right now, I think something that's more applicable to product teams is doubling down on our customer research and revisiting and reviewing what we know about our customers, users, and the problems that they have that our product solves for. You cannot expect the needs and the challenges that they faced during the pandemic has not affected them and affected the problems that they had prior to the pandemic. So meeting with those customers to gain and users to gain insights into the new problems that they are facing and identifying which one of those problems are in fact similar problems that might be problems that you're already addressing, but just like some similar problems that you can also address is super important. And that allows you to also quickly set out to solve similar problems that they've faced since the pandemic started. And you might be able to get them to upgrade, might be able to create a new plan for your users or a new tier for your customers to get them to upgrade to a higher plan if you can solve other series of problems that are very in line with the problems that you're already solving for them. They're just new set of problems that have been introduced into the new world that they're living in. And one technique that I'm a big fan of, and I think is really useful for building better products, is second order thinking. So second order thinking is a tool to make better decisions, and it allows you to outperform others by seeing things other people may not see. And it works by helping you think through the many effects of an action and identify the alternate conclusions that others may not think of. So you identify the obvious. Sure, the pandemic happened. These are the things that happened because of the pandemic. But then ask yourself, what is the immediate effect of this action? This is first order thinking, right? So identifying the obvious. And most people can see that, right? Most people can see that. Most PMs can see that because it's obvious and or immediately noticeable. What a lot of PMs don't notice and don't go there is that second order thinking, which is asking yourself, and then what, right? So what do the consequences look like in 10 minutes, in 10 hours, in 10 weeks, 1 year, and even 2 years from now? This is second order thinking, right? So by exploring possible effects beyond the first order, you'll recognize that that every effect causes something else, right? And every cause has an effect. It's not immediately obvious what those effects of that action can, what effects that an action can have. So engaging in second order, third order, fourth order thinking can help you see the bigger picture better than anyone who stops at first order, anyone who stops at that one first insight you get from your customer saying that this is the problem I have. Use that second order thinking technique to ask then what, like where else can this take and where else this can go. And the last thing I would add to that is this is a great time for a lot of companies to reinvent themselves and for startups to disrupt their industry. There are two things happening right now that could empower any PM to disrupt their industry without regard to resources that were controlled prior to the pandemic. First, the pandemic is creating new types of psychological and emotional needs. And I'm sure all of us on this call have experienced that. Second, given that many large corporations shut down the development of their second and third horizon products, each of the sectors served by those products is now an open game for new innovative products. For example, Airbnb, they completely decided to shut down the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 strategies and products, and they essentially let go the entire team that they were working on those Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 products. So look at those, see what those are, because Airbnb is not focusing on those right now. They're focusing on their Horizon 1 and the core business that they have to be able to survive and get through the pandemic. The other thing is to give you a specific example, think of B2B communication tools, right? The pandemic is right now creating new types of psychological and emotional needs. Back to Lee's question around, if there's a tool that you're seeing that's not working really well as it used to, is Slack, right? Social media and social products right now, they cannot be distractions. They're essential for how we work and network. And that's why you see Zoom, they jumped from 10 million to 200 million daily active users. And those are things that you see. And the work environment right now is now also an open game for new innovative products. We see how great communication can be with the consumer products we use every day at home and demand the same excellence in the product we use at work. So this, I believe, can be a big enough of a shift so that the new psychological and emotional needs that we have will not only be served by the existing products and the existing companies in the market, but also by new products and experiences created today.
Awesome. We have a follow-up question regarding remote working in remote teams.
Sure.
By Faiz. He's asking, will making entire organizations remote impact the culture of product teams? He makes a comment as well that personally he's never worked remotely until COVID, and feels like a significant value has been taken away where entire teams are remote now.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And that's why we, again, it's so easy now, like, well, Shopify is doing it, Twitter is doing it, let's follow the lead. But we've decided intentionally not to do that yet. And the rationale is exactly what Faiz mentioned, which is we believe that a significant value is taken away when the entire team is remote because of the fact that it's like I mentioned, a lot of the companies that have gone to work remotely, the hiring managers are not necessarily familiar with this whole remote situation, right? I've myself been lucky enough to work at companies that we work remotely, and that was by choice. But we do have people that right now on the team that need to do hiring, and this is a new world. They never hired a developer remotely. They never have hired, an executive remotely. Like a lot of the decisions that we make and a lot of the relationships that are built when you do that personally, and you do see them in person. So one of the things that remote companies have done, like Zapier, again, like they are the ones that they can be the playbook for any company that they want to go be fully remote. What they do is like once a year, you save so much money by like not paying office rent. Like for us right now, Careguide, that's one of our highest expenses. Downtown Toronto office space is not cheap, right? So once you save that money, then you can allocate it to other things. So what Zapier initially did, they did this twice a year. Now they're big enough that they might be only doing it once a year. I'm not sure, but they essentially went to, as a team, they traveled to, Mexico or somewhere in the US, and they just spent a week together. No work, just socializing, hanging out, getting to know each other. And they did that a couple of times. And again, they initially did that twice a year. They might be doing it only once a year now. And then one other thing that's working well for teams that have decided to be fully remote right now is that they've said after the pandemic, they're going to meet up at essentially together. There's a company called, what is it called? I can't remember the name, but essentially the idea is that you use a restaurant or a bar space during the day. So some restaurants and bars, I think this is only in Toronto right now, they're not utilizing their space from 9 to 5, and they're only operating and serving customers after 5 p.m. So they're working with this company that essentially allow you for $6 per person to use that restaurant or a bar area to work together as a team. And serve coffee and they have fast Wi-Fi, and why not? So they provide you that kind of space. So companies are saying that we're not going to pay rent. Instead, once a week on Wednesdays or Thursdays, we're going to meet up at this restaurant, at this coffee shop, and work together to kind of essentially still get that face-to-face aspect of being together and working together as a team. But again, I personally don't see this being the new norm and replacing that same feel and same kind of productivity you can get in the office. But again, it's different for every company.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we have just 2 more minutes left, and I think we have answered a lot of our questions. But quickly, one last question, and you can give a quick answer to this as well, so that we can get you out of here on time. Talking about the era after a pandemic, PMs would play a key role to get the business back on track. What do you think will help them stay on top of trends and succeed?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think we did talk about it a little bit, but honestly, and I'm going to mention a few things, but it's such a big unknown that it's really hard to say this is what has been proven to be right. And in the modern way of strategizing and building products, we've never experienced something like this to this extent. So it's an unknown to everyone at this point. But the one thing to think about and consider is that many behaviors that consumers and your business partners found bizarre, unnecessary, or even second class before the pandemic, they are going to have their status upgraded. And this unlocks completely new opportunities that never made it through that desirability criteria in the past. So it's important to think of those. It's important to kind of think about this again, like, your average person doesn't think about it at the company, but as PMs, as visionary leaders at the organization, you can think of those and ask yourselves, how is the world changing in fundamental ways? Can you identify a leading change and an opportunity that it unlocks for your business, for your company, for your product? And what is possible this year that was not possible last year, that was not possible back in 2016, 2017, 2018? And could this be huge if it worked? When you can say, I'm sure this is going to happen, right? This is a new trend for business. This is a new trend for my product. I'm just not sure if we'll be the ones to do it. That's a good sign. That means that you're onto something. Again, might not have the resources to execute on it yet, but you need to figure out how you can, as a PM, get creative and strategize something that can allow you to serve your business and help you to get your product from where it is to the next level. And the reality is that, obviously most people cannot be Elon Musk, right? So you have to understand what ideas are well suited for you. And that the one thing we talk about all the time is like this whole product market fit. The other thing that's important to think about is product founder fit, right? Especially at startups. If you're a PM at a startup, you also need to think about a product founder fit and product executive team fit. Do you have the right people to execute on this? It's important to think about those. But again, as visionary people, think of what that future is going to look like, right? Think of like in 5 years, in even 3 years, what the headlines, what are you going to see in the news, right? Are you going to see on the Daily Times or the New York Times that Amazon buys last mall in America? Is that going to happen? If you think that's going to happen, what that world is going to look like. And think of how that's going to affect your product, how that's going to allow you to be able to create meaningful features that are going to allow your business to be successful and allow you to be build a better product.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amin. This has been a great session, and thank you for answering all those questions and giving us all those insights. It's been a pleasure. And everyone, stay safe, take care, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Follow Product AMA on Twitter and send us your topic suggestions. We look forward to seeing you soon.